We are live. Bam. Video's going. Stream's going. In the studio. Team Early as Fuck podcast. We've got Drew YoungeDyke on the podcast. Drew, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, Bill. Actually, it's my paternity leave day, which I love that my organization allows me those. So I'm at home and watching my boy and having a great day.
That is awesome. What organization are you talking about?
So I work for the National Wildlife Federation. And for those that don't know, the National Wildlife Federation is America's largest conservation organization. We were founded in 1936. And the way that we operate is what I like to call us is the Willie Nelson of conservation. and that's because
Go
we bring
on.
the hippies and the rednecks together.
I like it.
And we're like an umbrella national organization for state conservation organizations. And the independent state conservation organizations include like the Wisconsin Wildlife Federation, Michigan United Conservation Clubs. And these federations set our policies. And about half of our independent affiliates are kind of your traditional hook and bullet hunter angler conservation organizations.
Okay.
But the other half are like Audubon, environmental leagues, watershed organizations, kind of more the environmental side. And so with about half and half, our policies don't pass unless they have, kind of like a supermajority and pretty good buy-in.
Gotcha.
And so our national policies really don't come together unless you get the sides where the conservationists and the environmentalists can agree. And so that becomes our policy that we push. So it's pretty cool to work for that organization and kind of straddle that line.
I like it. I'm looking at your website right now. Uniting all Americans to ensure wildlife thrive in a rapidly changing world. Love that.
Yeah.
It's
And we
fantastic.
actually just launched a new microsite focused on our hunter angler outreach,
Ooh.
which is at www.nwf.org/outdoors. And that's part of what I work on.
.org/outdoors. Found it. Bam, there it is.
All right.
I like it.
And you're hearing my son know in the background there. So I'm actually going to pick him up. He's going to join us.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Here.
Bring him
All
on.
right.
Bring him on. So I'm going to read off the website right here. National Wildlife Federation is one of America's oldest and most respected hunting and angling conservation organizations. From our founding in 1936 to present day, we have worked to safeguard fish, wildlife, and their habitats to ensure that our sporting traditions remain strong now and into the future. It's pretty badass. I invite all the listeners to go check that out. It'll be in the show notes. What's up, Noah? So that's I'm glad Noah's on here because that's a kind of a big part of why I wanted to have you on. Obviously, for my own selfish reasons, for finding out all the cool things that you do and how I can kind of help as a follower, a voter, and a conservationist. But also the big stuff being fitness, kind of garage gains, training for the baby, dad life, what all that looks like. So with that, I guess let's dive into where you grew up, kind of looking back at it, your childhood, what that was like, pastime, sport, outdoors, what that all looked like. And then we can move on into present day Drew.
You know, it's something that I've actually been reflecting on a lot, obviously, with the birth of Noah here. I grew up in northern Michigan in the northern lower peninsula, so underneath the bridge where we're known as trolls because we live under the bridge. And I grew up in Central Lake, Michigan, which is a small town of about 900 people. It's kind of a mix of a farm town and a tourist lake town. So it's right on a chain of lakes, just about 6 miles from Torch Lake and Lake Michigan. So we kind of had that mix of water-based summer tourism and, all the locals working on baling hay in the summer. So
Yeah.
I kind of got that when I talk about what the National Wildlife Organization is. It's kind of that same thing. I grew up with kind of 1 foot, baling hay, playing football, riding rodeo, that kind of stuff. And then the other foot hanging out with some buddies that would come up in the summer and hanging out on the lakes and doing doing that thing. So it's kind of a step in both worlds, and I think that's kind of a little bit of where my conservation ethic came in. Is I'm both a hunter and an angler, and grew up hunting. But then I care deeply about our water quality and our environment, and that comes from that same environment too.
I like it, man. So you said football, rodeo, right? And
Yep,
then
baseball, basketball, you name it. My dad was a football coach. He was a coach for our town for a long time. In fact, he tells me when I was not much older than Noah, he'd have me on his back at football practice.
nice. I like it.
Uh, so I kind of grew up with that. I was his quarterback, which didn't mean I could throw, but I knew all the plays. I ran them right. We ran the option. I knew when to pitch, when to keep it, mostly when to pitch at the very last second, so the running back had a clear lane, and I got nailed by the defensive end. So
Nice.
I did that part well.
For yourself, then, thinking back on hunting and fishing and sport, all of it kind of connected and creating who you are today. What are some of the more memorable moments that you kind of think back on and realize now were kind of big moments for yourself, and stuff you think about, I'm sure, with Noah?
Well, we always went up to our family cottage up in the western UP every summer for a week or two, and that was on my mom's side of the family, the Finnish side of the family, which is why you're always seeing me hashtag Sisu and Amerifin and things like that.
There you go.
And it's a little cottage on a lake, a traditional Finnish cottage with the sauna and everything. And there was always loons on the lake. We always had, campfires, and would row out. My great uncles would take me fishing in the aluminum rowboat. But there was always a bald eagle with a nest up in a white pine tree. And this was, back in the early 80s when there weren't quite as many bald eagles around.
Uh-huh.
And so it was pretty special. And I never knew the names of those trees when I was younger. I just called those eagle trees. And, that experience of being up there, I think really ended up shaping my future conservation efforts, including what we're doing now with encouraging people to hunt with non-lead ammunition and fishing tackle. And the other one I would say is wasn't really one single moment, but it was every moment at football practice, and that was running the hill. Our practice field was right next to a big sandy hill with a dirt strip up the middle of it that was all sand. And we called that the fourth quarter hill.
Okay.
And before we could get a drink of water, when we had a water break, we had to run the hill. So we'd run that hill 4 or 5 times a practice, and we dreaded the water breaks. Yep. So we'd be going, at it as hard as we could in practice, running plays, and then everybody starts getting tired, starts getting thirsty, and Coach, my dad, would clap his hands and say, "All right, blow the whistle, water break." And we'd have to go trudge up the hill. And what that taught us was we were doing that extra effort that other teams didn't have that hill. That was the extra thing that we were doing that they weren't. That gave us that confidence in the fourth quarter that we were in better condition. And it created the type of situations where you wanted to be first up the hill to prove, just that you were the fastest one up, you were working the hardest. But, kind of the bigger guys, sometimes the linemen, they were struggling up the hill. And if you were first up the hill, you were also expected. It was never said, but you were expected, and this is just what we did. You turned around, you went back up the hill again with your lineman, encouraging him the whole way. And what that did for teamwork, when we had tough times during the season, we'd take our own players only meeting up to the top of the hill. In the summer, we'd go up to the top of the hill and watch the fireworks over the lake on the 4th of July. We take dates up there, in the summer. We'd go trail running from there into the woods behind it. That hill became a symbol of kind of everything for our team and for those of us that played in the era when we ran it. I think it still affects us today when I think about things like train to hunt, going that extra effort. I always think back to that hill. That's still with me, even though I live hours away now.
I like it. And we both know Kenton and Brian both love hills at Train to Hunt.
Oh, man.
From experience, firsthand experience. So let's
and mountains.
Yeah, mountains. I was gonna say in Wisconsin we don't really have mountains, but they make ample use of all of our wonderful hills and ski slopes. So shout out to those guys for kind of carrying on what you're talking about, is that little extra effort, that mental strength you get from grinding out those hills. There you go, Noah. So taking that into, kind of what was high school or college athletics, hunting, fishing? What did that look like for you?
I started hunting and fishing when I was 14, and my dad would take me hunting, and he always taught me how to still hunt. That was the way that he grew up hunting, so that's the way he taught me. But then, when kind of varsity sports came along, when I was, a junior, senior, and I didn't hunt for about 4 or 5 years. And you had sports, you had girls. I was a three-sport athlete. I played football, baseball, and basketball. I rode rodeo in the summer. Bareback Broncs, broke my knee, missed a football season. That ended that. Um, but when you're doing that, I just didn't find much time for hunting, and I think that affects too how I think about hunter recruitment today. But then in college, I went to Michigan State, as you probably saw from my son's plasiography helmet.
Yep.
And I wasn't near the athlete to play D1 athletics, so I played intramural with the fraternity. But I had that time again, and when I got back into hunting, I think that's when it really cemented it, because my dad and my grandpa had a deer camp on Beaver Island, which is out in the middle of Lake Michigan, and that was the first time I went there when I was, I think, maybe a sophomore, no, a junior in college. And so that was my first time to actually deer camp, and it was such a nostalgic place, even going there the first time. My grandpa had started it up, and it was actually the place where I got my first deer, and it was his last time he was able to make it to deer camp.
Oh,
And so it was just so special to have that connection, for him to be able to see me get my first deer. And that kind of hooked me, that there was no more kind of drifting away from it at that point. At that point, I was a hunter.
yeah. I love that, man. Stories like that. It's what it's all about. The still hunting part of it, it's I've realized it in my own. Similar story to yours. Grew up hunting rabbits. My cousin had bear hounds, raccoon hounds. We had beagles, deer hunting. Never really did a lot of bird hunting, which is why I think I'm all in right now in adult life with the bird dog and training him and kind of understanding that whole experience. But yeah, my dad was specifically like ground blinds and tree stands for deer hunting. So that's kind of like how I started. And now I realize, meeting people like yourself and following along with how much you still hunt for everything, including grouse with a stick and string, which is, I'm still like, man, dude just likes to walk in the woods, which
Pretty
is
much. It's kind of like my fly fishing too. Like I very rarely catch fish. I realize I just kind of like to wade in streams.
Yeah, you're just out there. You're like, I'm an angler, but I'm gonna make it as hard as possible.
With still hunting, I started still hunting with a rifle, and
Yeah.
there was a learning curve to that. And you learn how to walk, how to use cover, how to use the wind to be able to get within rifle range and have a shot. And once I started making that happen consistently, I wanted another challenge. So then I switched to a compound bow, which I didn't get my first compound bow until I was 30. And then I still hunted with that. And then there was another learning curve with that. And once I started making that happen consistently a couple years ago, I switched to a recurve. It was like, once I started making it happen, instead of like just, okay, now I'm just going to provide meat every year,
Yeah.
with this, some people, I think, and everybody has their own goals with hunting, and whatever somebody's individual goals are, cool, that's your goal.
Yep.
Some people will say, I'm gonna stick with the same method, but I'm gonna hunt older deer.
Yeah.
And get bigger racks, and that's cool if that's your goal. My goal has been, I'm gonna hunt the same deer, but I'm gonna do it using a harder method. And force myself to learn that skill set, and that's kind of the growth curve I'm on now.
I like it. Yeah, I enjoy still. I'm still in the rifle still hunting area. I'll do it once in a while with a compound, but more often than not, the compound doesn't end well, and deer just laugh at me from a distance as I but that's part of the learning curve. But it's a lot of
It,
it's
it is.
it's
It's the
fun.
same as, double unders and muscle ups, which I'm still trying to get, like I could just be like, okay, I'm just going to do single unders for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can be like, what, I'm going to try to get double unders, and I'm still not there consistently, but I'm working at it.
Yeah.
And, I'm not at muscle ups yet, but I'm working at it. And I look at still hunting, with traditional equipment and making that progression the same thing. You start off at being able to do a pull up, and eventually, if you work at it, you're going to get to a muscle up. And it's the same thing with still hunting.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I enjoyed that transition you just made. uh, so, kind of, we'll bounce around a little bit then too. Is talking about fitness. What is kind of, you've talked obviously 3-sport athlete plus rodeo, so 4-sport athlete, and then going into adult life. College. You played intramural. You were on the intramural team. You said.
Oh yeah, well, our fraternity, just had a intramural team in the frat league,
There you go.
so you go out and play flag football, or play a pickup game of basketball. It wasn't too official. It got serious, but it wasn't too
Yeah.
official. But I'll be honest. In college and law school, I partied too much, and I drank too much beer, and I gained weight. And from there until about age 35, I was growing in the wrong direction, and what I ate and my diet was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
It was Mountain Dews and fried foods and beer and that kind of thing. And when I was 35, so I'm 39 now, so this is like 4 years ago. I started hearing about this train to hunt thing, and the hunter athlete thing. And my wife at the time was going to Pure Bar every day. So I'd get home from work, and she'd be at Pure Bar, and I'm sitting on the couch drinking a Mountain Dew and being like,
She's just killing
I
it.
used to be an athlete. I need to start doing something. So I just had that long period, and there were times during that period where I'd go to the gym for a couple months, like the Planet Fitness or the X Sport, your traditional gym, and do ISO exercises and maybe run on the treadmill for 10 minutes and call
Oh.
it good. But I never got in the shape that I wanted to get in. But when I started trail running, there's a little nature area by my house, with a single track dirt trail. And so I started running on that, and it was like 1 mile, huffing and puffing. And I built that up to 3 miles, and I did it every day. I created a habit of doing it. Um, and that got me to start eating better, because now I didn't want to undermine the work that I just put in. And it snowballed from there. I just like it was only a couple months of creating that habit, and that was just what I did, and it's been a regular part of my life ever since.
I like it, man. You touched on a lot of great points in that. Is kind of experimenting with different fitness programs or movement lifestyles, because like you said, it becomes a habit, and that's the most important part of it. Like find whatever it is, that thing that you can be consistent at, and make it a priority, make it a lifestyle habit, and it makes it way easier. It's no different than brushing your teeth at that point, or family time or movie night or date night. It just becomes that thing you do every day. So that's awesome to hear. And I think trail running, obviously single track, it's combining your love of the outdoors, kind of that experience, with your need as a human, as a athlete, as someone who recreates to move and to exercise. So that's awesome to hear. And then I know you do CrossFit in the garage right now. You've got are you familiar with the company Dad Bod Athletics?
No, I'm not. But
Oh, you
man,
need to give
it
them
sounds like my
you
jam.
need to give them a follow. It's Coach Ben. He's a crossfitian from Beyond the Barbell. It's his podcast he hosts with I'm blanking on the other guy's name. I really enjoy the podcast, but Ben is a dad, and he's got 2 sons, I believe. And the Dad Bod Athletics is just programming he puts out for garage training, for people who live a crazy life, and for dads who just kind of want to get after it, still be fit. And that longevity piece is huge in their programming. So that's something I'll post to the show notes as well. But Yeah, man. So for you, where the trail running thing, where does CrossFit fit in, and going into garage gains?
Yeah, so after I'd been trail running for probably close to a year, I was I got the assignment to edit Michigan Outdoors magazine. I was working for Michigan United Conservation Clubs at the time, and I had a theory on the themes that I wanted to push for the magazine, and that was I called it the four F's, and that was fitness, females, um, the future, and fishing. And or sorry, food, not the future. Sorry,
Okay.
fitness, females, food, and fishing, which were the themes that I wanted to hit for my quarterly one. And for the fitness side, I started listening to like the Cam Hanes interviews that he was doing with Joe Rogan, and I wanted to get an interview with him. And so I went to the Archery Trade Association show in 2016, I think, and he was doing like a group workout, and it was
Oh,
at
nice.
CrossFit Canonia, which is now like Fit Louisville. And and so that was my first CrossFit workout, and it was like with him. It was with Will Bradley was there,
Nice.
who was helping with Train to Hunt. Then some guys that I ended up meeting through Train to Hunt later on. But that was my first CrossFit workout, and I posted that to social media. It was pretty cool being able to work out with Cam Hanes, and actually a woman who is the older sister of my high school girlfriend
Okay.
saw it and says, "Hey, if you're into CrossFit, I'm a coach at Spartan CrossFit in East Lansing, which is not too far from where I worked at the time."
Okay.
And so I went there to check it out, and I was hooked. It was just it was so different than anything I'd done before. It, added strength training. It's that constantly varied that kept me interested. It pushed me to limits that I didn't know that I had before.
Mm-hmm.
And I had fun doing the movements and learning the movements, trying to learn the form, being coached, having that group dynamic. I think really helped, and I got in the best shape of my life, and I ended up getting into entering Train to Hunt after that. And um, I've kept with that at various times. I've kind of faded away from CrossFit since then, and did more trail running and distance running, and ran like an ultra marathon last year. But with the birth of my son, I don't have time to put in those like big miles on, going for like a 20-mile, Sunday run day
Yep.
long run. I just don't have time to do that. And so I've really reinvested into my garage gym. With my schedule, it's hard for me to join a box and an affiliate and make the scheduled times. Most of my time that I get to work out now is after we get Noah to bed. I can go out there and kind of do it whatever I need to do and have those short times on my own schedule, and that's what that's allowed. And so I've really kind of got back into that over the last couple months, and I'm trying to build that garage gym up with my outdoor writing freelance checks.
I like it. I like it. Um, yeah, man. I'm huge proponent of the garage gym. Even the gym I coach at here in town. I tell people, I'm like, especially parents,
Sorry,
it's
no, Noah's
Noah's in the
Noah's clamoring
background.
for some attention. Do you mind if we pause for a minute?
Yeah,
Can
we
you do
can
that?
pause for a moment. That's fine.
Thanks.
Yep.
Hey, buddy. What's up? What's up?
Oh, Noah. Gonna pull up. Bam, bam. Run, shoot, pack. Noah's just like, Dad, I want to work out. So I try to understand what I can. Bam, bam.
Just a second. My wife's calling. I'm going to grab that too, and then I'll get right back to you.
Yep.
Hey, dude. Good. Noah's good. I'm actually recording a podcast with somebody else. Okay. Okay. Bye, babe. Love you. Okay.
Bam. Back from the break. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, when it comes to parents and garage gyms, there's actually a couple of my friends right now. It's like the changing of the guard. Younger friend, first child, new to dad life, is buying the garage gym equipment from older dad whose kids are now all upper high school going off to college. And it's kind of like that changing of the guard where the older dad is like, wow, I'm going to have more freedom. I can do whatever the fuck I want. And then the younger dad is like, kind of like, like you're saddling up, you're in this for the long haul. You've got a 20-year journey where your life kind of centers, obviously you still you're going to work hard, pursue your passions, but really you're there for this new person. So yeah, man, I respect what you're doing with the garage gym.
Oh yeah, you got to see my wish list on rogue.com. It's on Rogue Fitness's website. I've got a wish list that far exceeds my means at this point.
Right, and most likely your space too. If you got it all in your garage, you'd be like, oh, I can't actually work out. It's just equipment. But yeah, man. So I think we touched on it before the podcast. The importance for you for longevity, where at first at 30, 34, 35, you said you started this kind of fitness journey, and it was because you were an athlete, your wife's kicking ass, you want to hunt and fish. Kind of how has the last 5 years changed for you?
Well, and I mentioned that I still hunt, and you're just on your feet a lot more. I'm not sitting still. Where I hunt, it's not mountains, it's not the West, it's northern Michigan, but it's hills. And so, I'm not going, 10 miles back, but I am going a couple miles back. So still hunting hills requires conditioning to be able to do it effectively. And, when you're in shape, you're not going to be breathing as hard. You're going to be able to, after you get into the hills where you want to hunt, you're going to be able to stay still a little bit longer. And being able to do that and hunt late into my life was my motivation.
Mm-hmm.
With Noah, with my son, we actually share the same birthday. He was born on my 39th birthday.
Nice.
And so, I'm a little bit older, and when he's 20, I'm going to be 59. I'm going to be almost 60. So, if I want to be able to hunt with him when he's older, maybe he goes through the same progression I do and, finds sports and girls and doesn't get to hunting until his mid-20s. I'm going to be in my mid-60s. So do I want to still hunt with him? I need to keep myself in shape and be healthy now, so that I can do that, not only hunt for myself late into life, but I need to be able to keep up with him for the next few decades.
I love it. So what does off-season training look like for Drew? What have you been focusing on this summer?
Well, after he was born, I got out of it, and I noticed that I was gaining weight, and because it was that transition from where even in the winter I was doing long runs in the snow on the trail, and then as soon as he was born, it's so time intensive, and that just becomes a far distant priority compared to taking care of your newborn. So this summer I realized that I was slacking off. And so to get back in it, I made a goal to try to work out every day in July. I missed 4 days, but I think I got my habit back on track. And then I'm focused in August on specifically just going to the basics of CrossFit. And that's eating right. It's, eating meat and vegetables and nuts and seeds and a little bit of starch and no sugar except for, donut day at staff meetings. And I actually went through and, I've never gone through like the certification, and keep in mind, I'm just an athlete who has trained at a couple different CrossFit gyms under good coaches. But I went through and I read the level 1 training manual just to help me better structure my workouts. And so I'm really just trying to follow that basic progression of, your metabolic days, your weightlifting days, and your gymnastic days, and combining them and, following that 3 to 5 day progression that's in the level 1 manual with the equipment that I have available to me and the trail that's right outside the house.
I love it. I got to move my dog. He decided he wanted to lay down by the power strip.
Nice.
It's a terrible spot. But yeah, so from as a strength and conditioning coach, I coached CrossFit for many years, started my own CrossFit gym back home before I moved to Stevens Point. What you're talking about, man, you're like one of my favorite types of athletes. the person that it becomes part of their lifestyle. They want to learn more, the why behind it, not only just come to the gym, work out. I love I love talking and working with those people as well, but the person who is all in, it doesn't even matter their training level. It's just the fact that they're all in on everything. And every time they come in, you can build off of the last workout. You're not always having to start back over with the basics of, no, that's not a squat. That was, I don't know what that was, but we need to like go, like it builds off of itself. You're talking about reading the L1, understanding the mechanics, the movement, why it's important to do these things, the physiological reasons why we're core to extremity, that kind of thing. That's awesome to hear. And as I think you and I kind of agree on this, and how we see everything is it's all connected. So what you do in the gym isn't separate from what you're doing out still hunting. That's something I see a lot in the outdoor space is people saying, "Oh, those are gym muscles. That's not going to do anything for me." It was doing a couple work days at a farm here that we have a CSA with at the gym, doing hay with them, and them being, "Oh, this is real fitness, farm fit, not just show gym muscles." And I just like, yeah, right. I just like outworked everyone. They were like, "Oh shit!" And it's like, dude, it's all connected. Yeah, there's no hay chafe in the gym, which is something I'm looking at getting, where I just blow it on sweaty people and see how well they do with a little chafe on them when they're sweaty. But it's all connected, so it's awesome to hear that you're combining these pieces and you see how they help each other, and you don't have time, like you said, to go out in the woods and hike for 3 hours. Like that's not something you can feasibly do right now. So it's like, well, I'm going to strap my pack on and do 45 minutes of step ups until my legs fall off. Like, that's my break.
And so much of still hunting is just like walking lunges.
Yeah, definitely. I love it, man. So where does then the fitness component fit into, I get you, this is going way back in the podcast, but touching on hunting recruitment, the articles you're writing, what does all that look like for you when you're crafting pieces to work with or talking to people for recruitment? Because I know even for myself, like the R3 thing has been something I'm coming more, it's more important to me, and I'm giving more thought into, how am I going to get more people involved in hunting? Because as of right now in life, I'm good not being a dad. I'm thankful for people like yourself and my dad who took it upon themselves. So it's like, as someone who's not looking to have children, doesn't want to kind of create, that work on that, because that's obviously going to be something of importance and value to you. How am I giving back to the community? How am I getting the right people involved with hunting to kind of bolster our numbers and also create this better narrative for hunting? Because I think it's unfortunately looked down upon, or you see rednecks everywhere, and I love many of my redneck friends, but then there's the few out there that give it a bad name, and there's even the hipster ones that give it a bad name. There's what is it, the upland hipster, I think, on Instagram, and it's kind of like making fun of all of the tribal bougie hipsters that are kind of showing up in hunting, and also so kind of giving it the bad image on the other side of things. So I guess with all of that ranting, what are your thoughts on R3 fitness and all that good stuff?
Well, I think we have to strip hunting down to actually what it is. And I think too often we make hunting like an element of a larger cultural movement, kind of in the rural right, right? Like we look at that as a symbol of rural right culture. But that's not what hunting is. Hunting is obtaining food from wild animals in the woods or in the field. It's something that our species has done for 200,000 years as this species, and anywhere from 3 to 4 million years as our predecessor species, depending on your who you're reading.
Yep.
And it's so elemental to what we are as humans that it's part of a natural human lifestyle. For instance, like on my Finnish side, my family came over in 1887. The lifestyle they lived, there's probably been consistent hunters and anglers in my family going back to the Iron Age and before. And so it doesn't have to be part of a rural right culture. It's just the activity of going out and doing it, part of a total healthy lifestyle. And that total healthy lifestyle includes eating clean. It includes eating natural foods, and it's part of obtaining your own food. And I know that gets wrapped up in the whole like hipster hunter foodie thing, but that's okay. And to me, that's still a part of train to hunt and CrossFit and trail running. So I see it as a healthy long-term lifestyle of trying to obtain my own meat. Not that I'm successful every year, but when I can, it's very healthy, low fat, high protein venison, using that as part of what I fuel my workouts with, and using my workouts then to have a more successful hunting season. Make that a whole cycle, right? Of food, of fitness, of hunting in the field, and that becomes a total lifestyle. And so the way that connects to R3 is you take out all of the kind of cultural BS that we've built up around hunting. And don't get me wrong, I love our hunting traditions, but our hunting traditions matter only to those of us who grew up with them. And the baby boomer generation is aging out, so we're going to have lower hunter numbers anyways through that. So if we want to maintain, even a semblance of enough hunting numbers to sustain it and to fund the wildlife agencies, then we have to bring new people into hunting from outside that traditional, culture of the last 50, 60 years. So to do that, I think focusing on it as part of a healthy lifestyle can appeal to anybody from any walk of life, whether they're urban or suburban, whether they've got a man bun or a genuine beard, or whatever their ethnic or racial or gender or even gender identity makeup is. None of that matters to the actual act of going out in the woods, learning the skills, obtaining your own meat, and making it part of a healthy lifestyle. And I think we can frame hunting and like that, then we can appeal to more people than if we just make it like a symbol of like, a certain rural culture.
I love
and
that.
that's from a dude who grew up in that rural culture.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love the way you put that. That's much more coherent than my own personal thoughts lately. So I appreciate that. I'm gonna be stealing elements of it in my own personal kind of programs. We've got a few in the works with a few people here locally, and I really enjoy that, the way you were able to put that. And it is so important to kind of like, you and I have grown up in these hunting traditions for good and bad. Like there's many things I can look back at and think, wow, like people really said that. Like that was, and other people were like, yeah, those are the problems. So being able to remove all of those things, strip it down, the good and bad, maybe highlight the good, like share the good stories with people so that they're like, oh yeah, I can create similar stories of my own through the act of hunting, through this human act, I'll say human tradition, not just regional tradition. I really enjoy that. And I've loved seeing like the recent Pat Durkin article, is hunting too white, like something like that is awesome. Or is it New Belgium that put out the hunter and the climber video?
Yeah, and actually they did a partnership too with a fly angler and a whitewater kayaker. And the fly angler was Leland Miyawaki, and I interviewed him on my podcast,
Nice.
National Wildlife Federation Outdoors podcast, a couple weeks ago. And
Awesome.
and it's all about finding those common elements. I think the hunter was Allie from Background Hunters and Anglers. She's also a member of the Artemis Sportswoman program that's part of National Wildlife Federation too. So and it's part of that whole thing that NWF has been trying to do for 80 plus years, is bring together those different sides of conservation. And what we do isn't so much always bringing people into hunting, but it's bringing maybe hunters and somebody who doesn't hunt, but who cares about wildlife together.
Mm-hmm. I love it. There's so much good stuff there. I'm all I'm all fired up right now to go door to door and talk about hunting. um, for yourself, kind of what are and this is something I ask a lot of people who are well more versed in the outdoor space than I am. So as someone who just enjoys it and understands its value, what are some of the big kind of uh, the challenges you see in the outdoor space? It could be outdoor recreation as a whole, hunting, angling. What are some of the big things you're focusing on right now, bringing people's attention to, or just items you're aware of?
Well, the things that I work most on in my own role at National Wildlife Federation are preventing invasive species spread. Invasive species and wildlife diseases are two of the biggest threats to wildlife and fish. So actually, you see my hat, it's Stop Asian Carp. Um, we collaborated on this hat with Rep Your Water, and it's to highlight the threat of Asian carp to the Great Lakes and also throughout the Mississippi River Basin, and our efforts to stop them. So we're trying to support the Brandon Road Lock and Dam plant south of Chicago to keep them from getting into Lake Michigan and spreading throughout the Great Lakes. That's one of the things. And chronic wasting disease. You being in Wisconsin, you've dealt with that for a while. In Michigan,
Yep.
it's growing. And one of the big issues with that is, I think, just our trust in sound science. Um, Sound science is what has brought wildlife species that we hunt and fish for back from the brink of extinction 80, 100 years ago to the point where we can argue over how many we get to kill now. Um, and we've trusted sound science to do that. But when something like CWD hits and the state wildlife agencies say, the best management practices for keeping it from spreading might include limiting baiting, might include shutting down high fence deer farms. When they propose things that make us have to adjust our behaviors, it seems like too often we say, well, I trust sound science as long as I can use it as a defense against anti-hunters. But the moment I have to change my behavior or my tactics, now I'm going to dismiss it. And I see a lot of that going on, not just with CWD, but a lot of other issues. I see it with climate change, which is a huge issue that's going to affect fish and wildlife, that's already affecting fish and wildlife. And too often, if it means that we have to do anything different, then we tend to ignore the science or try to downplay it. And that's affecting so many issues in hunting and fishing that until we kind of drop that defensive posture, we're going to keep losing wildlife species and hunting and fishing opportunities.
Yep. I was just talking about this with a friend of mine at the gym who we're kind of like I'm stealing all of his knowledge from dog training, from years of running waterfowl dogs, and with Django, it's trying to do all of the upland and the waterfowl with him, which has been kind of crazy. But we were talking about this when it comes to biodiversity. So something we're looking to host here is a monthly kind of public lands walkabout. So we're gonna he's like the tour guide, much more knowledgeable about everything. Works for the UW Extension. Jeremy from Tap Maple Syrups. So shout out to him. But do these public land walkabouts where I just kind of try to organize and get a bunch of fitness people to go out. We have these conversations. We're going to video it, but it comes down to the importance of biodiversity, because Stephen's Point is kind of growing, and Noah, I will invite you. You can come with. But it's kind of like more people want to move out to the outskirts. They put up their house. They put in this fake lawn. They mow down everything. They butcher like the woods, the edge habitat. So you go out to these places and there's no wildlife, or they're just passing through to get to the egg field on the other side for the corn, for the monocrop. So and then having this conversation about what is responsible land management? Why do we have these wild spaces? Why is it maybe not necessary for us all to kind of keep growing out, and consuming all of these wild spaces. So yeah, it's a deep conversation, and it requires all of us, myself included. Like, what are some lifestyle choices or habits we have? Because it always comes back to habits. What are some of these lifestyle habits I have that are not necessarily great for the environment, for the outdoor spaces I love, and what how do I personally go about changing these habits? So it's kind of a conversation we want to hopefully have here locally with a large group of people, and we're gonna see where it goes, because like you said, it's the only way we're going to uh, have these areas for Noah and the generation after Noah. So I guess with that, I mean, what are your what are your own personal kind of things you're working on?
Well, one of the other big pushes kind of goes right to the heart of that of what we can do as individuals, and that's encouraging hunters and anglers to use non-lead ammunition and tackle. That's one of those things that for most areas in the country, it's not a population level impact to wildlife, although lead sinkers that come off your line are having population level impacts on loons in some states. And I'm gonna get Noah real quick, and I'm
Yep,
gonna come right back to this.
no
Sorry, bud.
worries, not a problem. Uh, yeah, the he's so Drew is talking about leaded ammunition, lead weights for fishing, and my first experience was with that was, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago. A friend of mine found a loon in a parking lot, and obviously loons, for everyone listening, loons do not go on land. That's not their thing. That's not their jam, especially in a parking lot. And we were able to get it in a box, bring it in, and it was found out it had lead poisoning. Wherever it had been, it probably fell, was unable to swim or fly, ended up in this parking lot. And from that, I've become more aware of also the research with leaded ammunition, from a standpoint of, you shoot an animal, it fragments. You're consuming lead. The animals that consume the gut pile, the remnants you leave out in the field, consuming lead. And some of these animals are consuming, in these areas, especially specifically that are hunted heavily, consuming a large amount of lead. And it's not lead poisoning is not good for anyone. So
No, and it's especially not good for little guys like this. He's not eating solid foods yet, but when he will, I don't want little fragments of lead in the venison that I feed him.
yeah.
Lead has an impact on humans as well. It's why places like Flint are such a big issue when it's in their water, especially on kids. It affects their development. And so if you're hunting to feed your family and you have fragments of lead in the venison or the meat that you're feeding them, realize that that's not good for them,
No.
as well as not good for the wildlife. And and that's kind of that becomes a personal issue. That always doesn't need to be. Sorry, buddy.
No
That
worries.
doesn't need to always be regulated by the agency. That can be a personal decision of each hunter and angler to take personal responsibility, both for what they're serving their family, and what they're leaving out in the woods that they're hunting and fishing.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that I think about it is, in hunter safety, we talk about the zone of fire. We learn about knowing your target and what's behind your target.
Yep.
Hey, buddy, you want to talk to?
He's like, Dad, I am talking. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm all for unleaded.
And so we always talk about knowing where your target is and what's behind it. Like, you don't take a shot at a deer if there's another deer standing right behind it, because you can miss and hit the one that is not the target. Well, when we think about lead in a gut pile, or we think about lead shot that's left out in an upland area, there are animals that are behind that target that you had in your sights. They're not behind in space; they're behind in time. So that eagle that comes and feeds on the gut pile, gets lead poisoning. to me, I don't view that any differently than taking a shot at a deer that's standing behind another one.
Uh-huh.
And so that becomes to me an ethical issue as a hunter of being responsible for the bullet that leaves my gun.
Yeah. Noah's like, yes, preach it,
Yeah,
Dad.
we're gonna pause this. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna
I was gonna say we could wrap it up too. We're right around an hour, so if
okay.
you've got dad duties, man.
All right.
I appreciate you taking the time out to talk.
No problem. By the way, is helmet stickers here. Michigan State players get those for like touchdowns and game wins. I give him those for milestones, like when he sat up on his own for the first time, and
Ooh, I like
he
it.
just went through little minor surgery to correct something, and he got a helmet sticker for that too. So
Baby
he's in his
gains.
way as well.
Attaboy, Noah. I look forward. Is he gonna be at the little event? We don't have to speak further about it, but the little event next month.
No, he's a little bit young to make that trip yet.
Ah, dang it.
He'll be up there next year though.
Cool.
That'll be his spot too, and I hope what we're talking about, and it's okay, we can talk about it. Um, we have the Association of Great Lakes Outdoors Writers is in a few weeks in Wisconsin, and after that, I'm having a few conservation friends up to my family's cabin that I talked about earlier, and we're gonna have a cast and blast weekend of hunting grouse on public land with non-lead, and we're going to do some fishing on the lake and with non-lead fishing tackle too to highlight that. We're going to make a film about it.
I can't wait.
And so look forward to that in the next year when the film comes out. But really, it's just going to be a fun weekend. And this guy is he's gonna inherit that cottage just like all of us got to spend time there and inherit it. So when I'm thinking about making sure that we're limiting the amount of lead that we're putting in the public lands around there and in the water there. I want to make sure that when he catches fish in the future, they don't have that. When I want to make sure that there are eagles for him to see, like when I was young, that are still up there that don't get lead poisoning. I want him to see the loons out on the lake every morning, as the mist is rising up off the lake when it's early AF.
Yeah, buddy.
And I want him to see those loons in the same way that I have been able to, and that my mom was able to, and my grandma and my great grandpa and everybody down the line. That's part of passing that legacy down, is taking care of the wildlife that are around there.
Dude, you've got a way with words. I'm happy you're a dad, raising the next level or the next generation of human. Appreciate your time, man. That was a great way to conclude it, but anything else you want to leave dads, outdoor recreators, hunters with?
Yeah, remember that conservation is not about our current opportunities right now at this moment. Um, Sometimes we have to curtail our current opportunities. Sometimes we have to allow maybe a clear cut in an area we don't want to be clear cut, because it's going to create great successional wildlife habitat for things like grouse in 10 years or 20 years. Sometimes it means actually not cutting it down, even though we could get some board feed out of it now, because we want that old growth forest to remain around for future generations. It means maybe we accept that we can't bait deer right now because we want to slow the spread of CWD, so that when he's old enough to hunt, if he chooses to do so, there's still deer around to do so. And it's, maybe I have to spend a little bit more on copper ammunition rather than, lead bullets, but that means there's going to be eagles around for him. And when we take that long-term view of conservation, whether it's public land, whether it's water quality, whether it's investing tax dollars really in efforts to keep Asian carp out of the Great Lakes, it's not about our immediate returns right now. It's about generations down the line. And I think as long as we keep that view of conservation, we keep that view of fitness, we keep that view of food, it all comes together. And if we look at the future versus our own kind of current needs, we tend to make, I think, the right decisions.
Dude, love it. Thanks again for coming on, and we'll talk to everybody, or I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Thank you. And if you get a